Most people think their money problems would disappear if they were just more motivated, if they wanted it more, if they tried harder, if they finally got serious. So they wait for motivation, a new year, a new video, a new promise to themselves. And for a few days, it works. They feel focused, disciplined, in control. Then life happens. A long day, a small setback, an unexpected expense, and suddenly the motivation is gone, not reduced, gone. And when that happens, people don't just stop progressing, they spiral. They tell themselves, I knew it, I just can't stay consistent. I always lose momentum. Other people are built differently. But here's the uncomfortable truth: motivation was never the right tool to begin with. Motivation is designed for short bursts, not long term pressure. It works when the reward is close, when progress is visible, when effort feels exciting. Money doesn't work like that. Money requires decisions when you're tired, when you're bored, when nothing feels rewarding yet, and motivation collapses in those moments. That's not a personal flaw, that's biology. Your brain does not maintain motivation under stress. It conserves energy, it seeks relief, it looks for comfort, which is why relying on motivation for money is like relying on adrenaline for a marathon. It feels powerful at the start and guarantees failure later. This video isn't about how to get more motivated. It's about why motivation quietly sabotages people with money and what actually works when motivation disappears. Here's what almost nobody realizes about motivation. Motivation only works after progress is already happening, not before. When things are moving, motivation reinforces the behavior. When things are stuck, motivation disappears. And that's why so many people feel broken. They're waiting for motivation to start progress. But motivation only shows up after progress creates feedback. That's the trap. Early money progress gives you no feedback, no visible win, no emotional payoff. You save a little, nothing changes. You say no, nothing feels better. You delay gratification, life looks exactly the same. So your brain asks a very reasonable question: why am I doing this? Motivation needs dopamine, and dopamine comes from visible rewards. But money early on doesn't reward you, it withholds comfort. So your brain doesn't feel inspired, it feels deprived. That's why people can be incredibly motivated in areas like fitness challenges, new hobbies, career sprints, but fall apart with money. Those areas give you feedback, money gives you silence, and silence kills motivation. This is also why advice like just stay motivated or you have to really want it doesn't help. Wanting something doesn't change how the brain responds to delayed rewards. Your nervous system doesn't care about long term plans, it cares about how safe you feel right now. And when money feels tight, motivation becomes unstable, not because you're weak, because motivation is fragile by design. This is the mistake most people make. They treat motivation like a personality trait. They think some people have it and others don't. But motivation is just a reaction to environment. Change the environment, motivation follows. Don't change it, motivation dies. Which means the question isn't, how do I become more motivated? The real question is, what am I expecting motivation to do that it physically can't? Because once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself and you stop using the wrong tool for the job. This is where most people pivot to discipline. When motivation fades, they tell themselves, fine, I'll just be disciplined. They tighten rules, they restrict harder, they try to control themselves more aggressively, and for a short while, it works. They track every dollar, they say no more often, they force themselves to behave. But discipline has a hidden problem. Discipline assumes your brain agrees with the plan, and when your brain still feels unsafe, it doesn't. So discipline becomes exhausting. Every decision turns into an internal argument. Every purchase feels like a moral test. Every slip feels like failure. And that's not sustainable. Discipline works best when it's supporting momentum, not when it's fighting fear. Most people don't quit because they lack discipline. They quit because discipline becomes emotionally expensive. It costs focus, it costs energy, it costs constant self control. And when life adds stress, work, relationships, unexpected expenses, discipline is the first thing to break. That's why people feel like they're good for a while and then reset. They weren't inconsistent, they were relying on force instead of structure. Force requires constant input, Structure holds even when you're tired. This is the distinction almost nobody makes. Discipline is what you do when you're watching yourself. Systems are what work when you're not. If your progress depends on daily motivation, constant willpower, perfect behavior, it's fragile because humans aren't consistent machines. We're emotional, we get distracted, we get overwhelmed. And money systems have to survive that reality. That's why people who look naturally disciplined often aren't forcing anything. They've reduced the number of decisions, they've removed friction, they've designed their environment so the default action helps them. From the outside, it looks like discipline. From the inside, it feels lighter. This is the shift most people miss. Stop asking yourself to be stronger, start asking your system to be smarter. Because when your system carries the weight, your behavior doesn't have to, and that's when progress stops feeling like a fight. There's a reason some people seem calm with money, even when they're not rich. And it's not confidence, it's not intelligence, and it's definitely not motivation, it's margin. When someone has even a small buffer, their entire relationship with decisions changes. They don't rush, they don't panic, they don't overthink every choice. Not because they're better, but because the consequences aren't immediate anymore. Most people underestimate how much of their stress comes from timing. When you're living close to zero, every decision feels urgent. Every delay feels dangerous. Every mistake feels amplified. Your brain isn't asking, is this the best option? It's asking, what's the safest move right now? And that question quietly shapes your entire life. It affects where you work, what risks you take, what opportunities you ignore, what you say yes to, what you never even consider. But once margin appears, even a little, something shifts. You don't need to react immediately. You can wait, you can compare, you can say no without fear. That's why people often look more disciplined after they get ahead. Not because discipline suddenly arrived, but because urgency disappeared. From the outside, it looks like confidence. From the inside, it feels like relief. This is why copying habits from people who already have margin often fails. You try to budget like them, save like them, invest like them, but you're operating under completely different pressure. It's like copying a workout routine without copying the recovery. You get exhausted before you see results. The people who move forward long term don't eliminate stress, they delay it. They move pressure away from today and into the future, where it's easier to handle. That's the real advantage of stability. It doesn't make life perfect, it makes problems slower, and slower problems are manageable problems. Once you experience that even once, your brain starts trusting the process. And when the brain trusts the process, it stops sabotaging it. That's when consistency becomes natural, not forced. There's a moment that quietly separates people who stay stuck from people who finally move forward. And it has nothing to do with motivation, nothing to do with discipline, nothing to do with learning one more strategy. It's the moment you stop treating money as a constant emergency. Not because everything is fixed, but because everything isn't fragile anymore. Before that point, your decisions are defensive. You're not choosing the best option, you're choosing the least dangerous one. You avoid risks that could help you. You tolerate situations that slowly drain you. You delay decisions that matter, not because you don't know better, but because your nervous system doesn't feel safe enough to think long term. After stability, even in small amounts, that internal pressure starts to loosen. You don't rush. You don't need instant relief. You don't feel the urge to fix everything today. And this is where something important happens. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop saying, I'll start next month. I'll be disciplined after this expense. I'll focus once things calm down because things are calmer, not perfect, just calm enough. And that changes how you relate to yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's always one step away from messing things up. You stop assuming future you will fail. You stop planning around fear. Instead, you start trusting your ability to handle discomfort. And trust is what makes long-term behavior stick. This is why people who reach this stage often sound different when they talk. They're less dramatic, less reactive, less obsessed with hacks and shortcuts. They don't need motivation because they're no longer fighting themselves. Their environment finally supports the behavior they were trying to force before. That's why money advice feels useless to people under pressure and obvious to people with stability. Same advice, different nervous systems. So if you've been feeling stuck, if motivation keeps fading, if discipline feels inconsistent, it's not a flaw. It's not laziness. It's not that you're broken. It's that you're trying to build long term behavior inside a system that still feels like an emergency. And emergencies don't respond to motivation, they respond to relief. That's why boring progress wins. That's why slow stability beats dramatic change. That's why the quiet phases matter most. Not because they feel good, but because they create the conditions where progress can finally last. And once you understand that, you stop asking, why can't I stay consistent? And you start asking, what would this look like if I wasn't under constant pressure? That question doesn't just change how you think about money, it changes how you build your life.